Hello, everyone. Here we are on another Wednesday Bible study, looking at the book of Ecclesiastes. I hope that you've seen the previous videos. Chapter 1 and 2 are really good chapters. Plus, I also give a lot of background info on those, about the whole book, kind of. And then chapter 3 and 4, I really like. Chapter 3 is my favorite chapter of this book. And we get into some really deep topics there. And so I hope you've checked those out. But today we're going to get into chapters 5 and 6, which has some pretty good reflection on the way of life. And excuse me, this is kind of where the author Solomon starts to really explain how you should live with God. The first 4 chapters, God seems a little bit absent, and when he is present, it's a little bit of a peculiar occurrence, if you will. But yeah, now see here in 5 and 6, he starts talking about life with God, especially going over this theme of kind of all is vanity, right? So he's saying, how do you live with God in the midst of these vanities? So without any further ado, we will get started after I drink this water. Okay, chapter 5, Fear God, starting here at verse 1. Guard your steps when you go to the house of God. To draw near to listen is better than to offer the sacrifice of fools, for they do not know what they are doing evil, for they do not know that they are doing evil. Be not rash with your mouth, nor let your heart be hasty to utter a word before God. For God is in heaven, and you are on earth. Therefore, let your words be few, for a dream comes with much business, and a fool's voice with many words. So, something to extrapolate out of this little paragraph here, verses 1 through 3, is there's a key emphasis on your words, how your words play a huge role in your relationship with God and who you are as a follower of God, and now, as we would say, follower of Christ. So here in verse 2, where it says, be not rash with your mouth, nor let your heart be hasty to utter a word before God. So this kind of reminds me of a part in Mere Christianity, a book written by C.S. Lewis. If you have not read that, what are you doing with yourself? Let's see. This is the greatest book, greatest Christian book, second to the Bible, that you will read. But anyways, quick plug for that. But anyways, C.S. Lewis, he talks about how there's truth in when you're scared, when your instincts kick in. So he doesn't really talk like someone just scared you. He's talking about when you kind of gut react to something, and it could be anything. Maybe someone did something to you. Maybe there's a gut reaction to what you yourself have done. Maybe just witnessing something and what you have to say about it. So in those gut reactions, it's really just instincts. And he makes this really kind of good analysis of the fact that when we are in those gut reactions, that's when our true selves come out, because we don't have any time to think. We don't have any time to try to make sure what we're about to say is going to portray the right image of ourselves that we want. It's just all natural. And sometimes we find ourselves saying, doing things that we might find to be a little bit wrong. You might say wrong, dark, just kind of gross. And So I think that's a good reflection on this first paragraph here, where you really want to take a look at yourself in those moments. You know, uh, don't nor let your heart be hasty to utter a word before God. And so when you're quick to do these things, you're quick to react. Really take a look at yourself and learn how you reacted, what you said, what you did, and really ask yourself, can you do better in this? Is there a way that you can improve as a person here? So I think the more we analyze ourselves when we do utter words quickly, especially before God, right? Everything, God sees everything. So when we utter words quickly, hastily, when we say many things, when we have these gut reactions, we see our true selves. So learn from it. And then when you can learn from it, there will come a time where your gut reactions, what you do and what you say in those quick moments, you will find yourself reacting as a better person. And that would be a sign that you are at your core becoming a better person. And so if you just really be careful not to utter those things in those gut reactions, you're really challenging yourself and you're changing your mind about how you react. So that's something to keep in mind, but I don't want to get bogged down here on that paragraph. So let's move on to verse 4. When you vow a vow to God, do not delay paying it, for he has no pleasure in fools. Pay what you vow. It is better that you should not vow than that you should vow and not pay. Sorry, I'll read that to be less choppy. It is better that you should not vow than that you should vow and not pay. Verse 6 here. Let not your mouth lead you into sin, and do not say before the messenger that it was a mistake. Why should God be angry at your voice and destroy the work of your hands? For when dreams increase and words grow many, there is vanity, but God is the one you must fear. So I really like what he has to say in verses 4. Well, I mean, the whole paragraph's good, but 4 and 5 in particular are really good. When you vow a vow to God, do not delay paying it, for he has no pleasure in fools. Pay what you vow. It is better that you should not vow than that you should vow and not pay. Sorry, it's choppy. It's just small words, small spacing. Obviously, they didn't do MLA format. Kind of mad about that, but anyways, so he's don't say you're going to do something for God and then procrastinate on it. That's basically the message there, and I think that's really something that we can all fall into. I know I have fallen into oh, I just sinned, but I'll try to or I keep sinning, but I'll try to stop doing it tomorrow. It's like, no, stop now. Try to stop now. Do your absolute best. See, he says, it is better that you should not vow than that you should vow and not pay. Because essentially that's making yourself a liar. And we know lying is awful, and we don't want to lie to God. And so trying to think of how to say this right. So when you make these promises to God, I think before you even make these promises to God, you have to have it within you to say that, okay, am I going to do this? Am I going to come through on this promise? Am I going to come through on this vow? And you have to start off saying, you have to give yourself, okay, whenever I make a promise, it is because I am going to do it. You can't have doubt in you saying, I'll make a promise, but I don't know if I'll do it. No, you can't be that way. You have to be what my pastor here in Barstow says, all in. So when you make that promise, you have to be all in. So, and then here it says, for when dreams increase and words grow many, there is vanity. There in verse 7. It's like what he's saying there is you keep coming up with these ideas of how to please God and how to serve God, and all they are just dreams. And it's like, no, make them into a reality. And then when your words grow many, I think what he's trying to say there is that when you don't come through and you don't perform what you've promised, all you have left are words, and those words turn into excuses. And I like this old saying that one of my old Boy Scout troop leaders said. He said, "Excuses are like butts. Everyone has one or has them, but you get the point." It's like everyone can come up with an excuse of not to do something or why you did something that you weren't supposed to. The thing is, though, are you going to own up to it? Are you going to own up to that promise? Are you going to own up to the fact that maybe you broke that promise? Something to think about. So we'll move on here to this next little section, the vanity of wealth and honor, here at verse 8 of chapter 5. If you see in a province the oppression of the poor and the violation of justice and righteousness, do not be amazed at the matter. For the high official is watched by a higher, and there are yet higher ones over them. But this is gain for a land in every way, a king committed to cultivated fields. So, I don't know if in your Bible it says this, but in mine I have a little subscript there at the end of verse 9. It says, the meaning of the Hebrew verse is uncertain. Maybe yours says something like that, but in this Bible and this one, they both say the same thing. So I'm guessing it's probably the same with other translations. But nonetheless, we could still try to unpack it, because what do biblical scholars have on us? So this is kind of saying that this is like a little bit of a just kind of the institutional injustices. And I guess the best I could tell you about this from what I get out of it is really don't have faith in your government, because the government is okay. I don't want to get into some like conspiracy theory guy and anti-government loon bag, although I am anti-government, but I should say anti-big government. But anyways, I don't want to digress too far. But obviously, a government is an institution made up by man, established by man, and the Bible is the perfect example of showing that not only is man sinful, but that these institutions are absolutely sinful. I mean, you look in the book of Judges, where God is appointing judges over Israel, and they start out good, right? They have this dream of goodness and righteousness. They start off pretty good. God says, you don't want to have these people there. And they're like, no, we do. And he's like, okay. And they start off good, and then they start losing what makes them, if you will. And the judges just become so wicked. And then you go into 1 Samuel and 2 Samuel, where you have they start a kingship, and we see the first king is basically a huge coward. And then the best King David, even he, in his power, he used his power to become an adulterous murderer. And then everyone after King David, including his son Solomon, who wrote this book, all became very sinful, although Solomon was better than a lot more of them who came after him. But even the best one, David, he was still not good. And in these institutions, you look in the book of Kings and Chronicles, and you just see the absolute sinfulness of these men. That I'm not saying the institution itself brings it out of them, but just the fact that this institution was made by man and man is sinful, it can really help illuminate the sinfulness of man, can really draw them out. And look in Matthew chapter 4, where Jesus is tempted in the very beginning, verses 1 through 11, where Jesus is tempted by the devil. And the devil says, if you bow down to me, I'll give you all of what I control in this world to you. All of it will be yours. And Jesus, essentially, you would think he would say, well, it's not yours to give, but he doesn't say that. He just says, all right, be gone, Satan. So it's kind of saying, well, I guess the devil does have a little bit on these worldly institutions, right? So when you see this violation of justice and violation of righteousness, as it says here in verse 8, do not be amazed at the matter. So don't let this break your heart. Like, these people who run countries are just as sinful as you and me and the next guy. So and the institution can just really help illuminate that. So don't be surprised. But so verse 8 and 9 just kind of talks a little bit about injustice, institutional injustice. But then here we get into this theme here at verse 10, and that this will go all the way to chapter 6, verse 9, about this kind of fight between greed and contentment that the author makes. So here we'll start at verse 10. He who loves money will not be satisfied with money, nor he who loves wealth with his income. This also is vanity. When goods increase, they increase who eat them, and what advantage has their owner but to see them with his eyes? Sweet is the sleep of a laborer, whether he eats little or much, but the full stomach of the rich will not let him sleep. So, just in sum, we've talked about this in the last couple of videos about the vanity of money, the vanity of wealth and riches. Please check those out if you haven't. I don't want to get too far into it, but essentially it's just this thing that that's unsustainable. It comes and it goes, and then you kind of make it your idol. And when it comes and goes, you want more of it. And we'll get into the idea of this appetite for sinful desires later on in this video. But just kind of, it says, sweet is the sleep of a laborer, whether he eats little or much, but the full stomach of the rich will not let him sleep. So I may not have this entirely right, but my idea and what I have come to learn about really kind of ancient civilizations, and this was in the 10th century BC, so we would definitely say that as ancient. It seemed that the really rich and wealthy people, they usually got it by inheritance. And and maybe this is wrong on my part to draw this, but we kind of see in movies and in TV shows about really old civilizations, about like rich, they kind of just sit around and they kind of eat and they just spend money and engage in politics maybe and influencing people, and it doesn't seem like they're really out working. Although nowadays the rich people, I mean, let's be honest, there's a reason why they're rich. It's because they work their butts off, and they're smart about it too. But I digress. So back in the day, it's like you have all this money and you can afford to fill your stomach, but it's like, how can you really live with yourself that way though? So going back to this theme over like especially the last couple of videos where he says, if anything, man's purpose in his life is to take purpose in his work. And when you're kind of just sitting around, just kind of really soaking in all these riches, what's your purpose there? I'm curious to know. But someone who works, who's a laborer, They sleep well. They sleep well at night, knowing, hey, I worked hard, and I deserve this good sleep, I guess. And you can take pride in the fact that there's purpose in what you've created and what you've done. So verse 13, there is a grievous evil that I have seen under the sun. Riches were kept by their owner to his hurt, and those riches were lost in a bad venture. And he is father of a son, but he has nothing in his hand. As he came from his mother's womb, he shall go again, naked as he came, and shall take nothing for his toil that he may carry away in his hand. This also is a grievous evil. Just as he came, so shall he go, and what gain is there to him who toils for the wind? Moreover, all his days he eats in darkness, in much vexation and sickness and anger. So, kind of to say that when you make wealth and riches your idol, and you work so hard to make that your purpose in life, to achieve more and more wealth and status, these things can be undermined and just toppled over quickly. I'm sure I don't have to provide an example of those things happening. We see it firsthand. People having a lot of money, and maybe they blow it in gambling. They blow it doing something illegally, so they go to jail. They lose all of it, or just kind of misuse of it, and then maybe it's just absolute sheer bad luck. Maybe they had all their riches stored in their house, and then their house just was overrun by a huge hurricane. It's just gone and lost. And so it's like, it's kind of like this idea of vanity, right? So what is really the purpose of having this? Yeah. So here at verse 18 now, behold, what I have seen to be good and fitting is to eat and drink and find enjoyment in all the toil with which one toils under the sun, the few days of his life that God has given him, for this is his lot. Everyone also to whom God has given wealth and possessions and power to enjoy them and to accept his lot and rejoice in his toil. This is the gift of God. For he will not much remember the days of his life, because God keeps him occupied with joy in his heart. So this is when the author starts bringing in this idea of contentment. So in the first two paragraphs, from verse 10 to 17, we have this idea, this concept of greed. And what Solomon is saying is that this greed can never be satisfied fully. And even if it could be, it can just be taken away like that. And so he comes to say, look, even if you have been gifted by God, and these gifts are by God because he is the ruler of this world and of the universe, even if you have these gifts and these riches, you need to still work, and you need to still have this purpose of just kind of serving. It doesn't have to necessarily be like just a job working, but it can also be, sorry if you hear my dogs barking, but it's like, especially serving too. I think a big thing to take away from this is you could find so much purpose in serving God. In fact, I think that is the purpose of life, is to love God, and that entails serving him. So rejoice in your toil. So work and rejoice in the product of that, and be content with it as well. Don't be greedy. Be content with what God has given you, and work to maybe make it better, right? God, some people get a really bad card dealt with them when they're born into this world. Some people are mouth or fed at the mouth with silver and gold spoons, and it's just the way that life works. But you should take what you have as a gift, even if it's little, and then what you have, work and say, God, I'm working to better this gift that you've given me to receive, and by this work I shall receive more, sort of thing, right? So we'll move on here to chapter 6. There's not a really big difference between chapter 5 and 6. You could almost call it one chapter, but nonetheless. So here at chapter 6, there is an evil that I have seen under the sun, and it lies heavy on mankind. Here it is. A man to whom God gives wealth, possessions, and honor, so that he lacks nothing of all that he desires. Yet God does not give him power to enjoy them, but a stranger enjoys them. This is vanity. It is a grievous evil. If a man fathers 100 children and lives many years, so that the days of his years are many, but his soul is not satisfied with life's good things, and he also has no burial, I say that a stillborn child is better off than he, for it comes in vanity and goes in darkness, and in darkness its name is covered. Moreover, it has not seen the sun or known anything, yet it finds rest rather than he. Even though he should live 1,000 years twice over, yet enjoy no good, do not all go to the one place. So, kind of take that apart. It's a little complicated. So, verse 1 and 2. Well, just at 2 here. A man to whom God gives wealth, possessions, and honor, so that he lacks nothing at all that he desires, yet God does not give him power to enjoy them, but a stranger enjoys them. This is vanity. It is a grievance, or it is a grievous evil. So it's kind of interesting how he words that. You can't even enjoy all that God gives, but a stranger will. So I think right here there's this implication of greed again. I don't think he's necessarily saying that what you have you can enjoy. I think you can definitely enjoy what you have. That's called contentment. But I think he's saying that yet God does not give him power to enjoy them. So God kind of leaves it up to you. Are you going to be greedy, and are you going to have this insatiable appetite for wealth and power and possessions, or are you going to be content with what God has given you? And that's not just in the material things too. Think about the gifts you have. Maybe you have a gift to be very musically inclined. Maybe you have a gift to I don't know, think about big ideas. Maybe you have a gift to be very handsy, right? Maybe you're, for example, a very good mechanic. So these gifts, these things that God gives you, are you going to be content with them, or are you going to be greedy about them? And so, God doesn't give you that power to enjoy it. It's kind of part of that free will idea that we talked about in the previous video. You have this ability to choose, okay, am I going to see this as a gift from God, or am I going to kind of put God aside and say, no, I want more and more and more and more? I think that's what he's saying here. And then verse 3 through 6. So he's saying here, I'll read over it again. If a man fathers 100 children and lives many years, so that the days of his years are many, but his soul is not satisfied with life's good things, and he also has no burial, I say that a stillborn child is better off than he. For it comes in vanity and goes in darkness, and in darkness its name is covered. Moreover, it has not seen the sun or known anything, yet it finds rest rather than he. Even though he should live 1,000 years twice over, yet enjoy no good. Do not all go to one place. So again, still extending that idea of you could live forever, and you could have this insatiable appetite for wealth and power, and if you're not content with it, if you don't see it as a gift from God, it doesn't matter how long you live, that it will never be satisfied, and you will never be able to really enjoy it. And kind of if a man fathers 100 children and lives many years, so that the days of his years are many, I guess back then it was if you had a lot of children, that was a really good, you were kind of seen as very blessed, right? Just kind of in there in Jewish culture. You're seen as blessed and just really gifted. And so even though you have all of these children, which any right person who has a good sense of morals is going to obviously put their children first and put their love for their children first. But even if you have so many children to put first, if you have this appetite, this this greediness to always want more, even that, since it can never be satisfied, even that will eventually supersede the love for your children. And that is most definitely an easy path to pure sin, and that means hell. So a lot of warning here. This is a very important theme. So kind of to wrap up this theme here in 7 through 9, all the toil of man is for his mouth, yet his appetite is not satisfied. For what advantage has the wise man over the fool? And what does the poor man have who knows how to conduct himself before the living? Better is the sight of the eyes than the wandering of the appetite. This also is vanity and a striving after the wind. So this kind of just furthers what I was saying, furthers the theme. I also want to touch back on verses 4 and 5. Just or yeah, so verses 4 and 5. It's kind of saying this theme or another theme that's prevalent here that we've seen in the previous videos is this idea of death. Oh, my light burned out. Sorry about that. Or got too hot or something. Anyways, this theme of death being the great equalizer, right? So even if you have this insatiable appetite for riches and wealth and power and whatever, you can strive for this for 1,000 years, but at the end of the day, you will still end up like a stillborn baby, buried, right? And at least in this physical world. And so it's still going back to, it's like, well, what is the meaning in that if that's all that's going to come of it? And then we saw what we read in the last video about how, I think it might have been in 1 and 2, but how you may work your whole life to get all these riches and this power, but maybe the legacy you leave, the people whose hands your legacy is in, maybe they're just absolute letdowns and just incapable people, and maybe they just throw it all away, So he's saying that death is a great equalizer. And then verses 7 through 9. So it's kind of going back to in the very beginning of chapter 5 about what you have to say for your mouth. All the toil of man is for his mouth, yet his appetite is not satisfied. So he could say it, like when we see people who are really of this sort, this greedy, insatiable appetite sort, they have a lot to brag about. They have a lot to be proud of. They have a lot to show for their work. And all it is, and at the end of the day, all their work is for them to show it off. And because we know that their appetite is still not satisfied. I think that's really interesting, right? Something that we could think about for ourselves. Drawing this compare and contrast of the wise man and the fool, and it's like what advantage. So he says here in verse 8, for what advantage has the wise man over the fool, and what does the poor man have who knows how to conduct himself before the living? So I'll be honest with you, I'm not really sure exactly what he's trying to say there. I'd be interested to hear what you think about that. Verse 9, better is the sight of the eyes and the wondering of the appetite. This also is vanity and a striving after the wind. So I think what he's saying here is when you, um, how did he phrase that? Better is the sight of the eyes. So if you take a look at what you have, kind of metaphorically, eyes, take a look at what you have and you see it as a gift from God, this idea of being content with these gifts you have. So see them as a gift and then be content in the fact that someone out there has it worse than you. Probably a lot of people. If you're listening to this, you probably live in America. I don't think I'm getting to that many people, but um, you know, especially in America, there are a lot of people who have it worse than we do. And take some content, be content in the fact that, and there's this contentment can be synonymous with humility, right? Be humble in the fact that you have these things, be thankful for them, and don't let it become an appetite, because if you see it as a gift from God, contentment will come. But if you don't see it as a gift from God, all you will want is more and more of it. It'll just be an insatiable appetite. So to wrap it up here at verse 10, this is where it kind of bleeds in. It starts bleeding into chapter 7, which we will get into in the next video. But here, we'll wrap it up. Whatever has come to be has already been named, and it is known what man is, and that he is not able to dispute with one stronger than he. The more words, the more vanity. And what is the advantage to man? For who knows what is good for man while he lives the few days of his vain life, which he passes like a shadow? For who can tell man what will be after him under the sun? So this is when he's going to get into sort of that. He's kind of already talked about it before, but just what he would say, the part of vanity in wealth, or sorry, not wealth, wisdom. And let's see here. Let's see if there's anything in the footnotes. So verses 10 through 11, God is the one who has already named all things. To name something is to exercise authority over it, from Genesis 2:19 to 20. The preacher, the author, thus confesses that God rules over all things, and he points out that it would be foolish for mankind to dispute with God's sovereign ordering of the world. To do so would only produce more words and more vanity. So there's some good clarification there. It's like, well, God has created all of these things. God has asserted his authority of all things. It is, there is no maybe not. It is. So when you've come to realize that all of this is under the authority of God, what good is there to dispute about it? As when we think of people who are super wise, I don't know. I kind of think of like ancient Greek philosophers and how they're always arguing, and like Socrates, who was out in the middle of everywhere and he was just arguing about things. And I mean, I'm super into philosophy, and even like secular philosophy too. It's very interesting to me. But even now, or even now and then, I still get these thoughts that I'm like, man, like what point is there to be thinking about all of these things? And there is importance of them in the world, but in the grand scheme of things with God, it's like, what exactly is there for us in all of these disputes? So to wrap it up, for verse 12, it says, For who knows what is good for man? So the proverbs that follow, will be in chapter 7, are clustered around the thematic words good or better. And they attempt to provide at least a partial answer to this question. So we'll get into the answer of this question in verse 12. The answers will kind of come in chapter 7. And I guess that's a good way to end the video here. Is we've kind of come to the end where there's this transition between 6 and 7, and I'll have to try to remember as best as I can to kind of leave off at verse 12 in chapter 6, leading into 7 next video. So to wrap up, chapters 5 and 6. I think a lot of good wisdom. Like I said, it's kind of like the first time where he's really talking about life with God, life in combination with God, and in the beginning of chapter 5, where we talk about sort of fear of God, and to come through with your vows to God, and then also analyze who your true self is in those really hasty moments and those really gut reactions, because in those really snap reactions, that's what comes out. We don't have time to put on a facade. It's just our true selves that react. And be quick to analyze that, and don't be quick to let it out, I guess. And all, like I said, verses 4 through 7, be clear in what come through with your vows. It's like he says, it's better to not vow at all than it is to vow and then not come through. And then verses 8 and 9, kind of the injustices of institutional power. Don't be amazed, don't be in awe, don't be let down when you see governments acting the way that they can. Not just in America, but think of history as well. And then after that, verse 10, and then that goes all the way to verse 9 of chapter 6. That clash between greediness and contentment. Well, I shouldn't say clash, but that contrasting between greed and contentment. So we see that greed can never be satisfied, and even when you have all this stuff to show for your for the stuff that is a result of your greed, it can be taken away like that, but then at the same time it still doesn't satisfy because you want more. But then when you're content, when you see these things as a gift of God, not, like I said, not just material things, but more what you may call metaphysical things, natural gifts, in other terms, when you see them as a gift of God, it's much easier to use them to serve God, and you're content in the fact that his will is done with your gifts and what has been blessed to you, as opposed to if you disregard him, your will is done and it will never be satisfied. And then kind of to wrap up about in verse 10 through 12, that's that transition into 7, like I just said, about wisdom. What exactly is there to be argued about? What point is there to be argued about things? And I think next video will be fun, talking about the contrast of wisdom and folly. And we'll get to talk about just kind of the importance of philosophy, maybe where it might overstep its boundaries, maybe where it's not enough. And then we'll get into chapter 8, where things get a little better, and then in the next video it gets worse again, where it worse in the sense that the message gets darker. But anyways, that ends it for today. That is chapters 5 and 6. I want to thank you for joining me. If you have watched all 3 of these videos. I cannot thank you enough, because I see after like a week, I'll only have like maybe 10 or 11 views. And if you're one of the few, if any of those views are people who have watched all 3 videos, I can't thank you enough. I put in the time to film this video, and then I also put in probably another hour beforehand, if not more, just reading, preparing what I'm going to say, what I want you to learn, what I want you to get out of it, or what I think is worth getting out of it, I should say. I hope you get out more than what I've given you. And with that being said, if you do get out more, please contact me. Tweet at me at tmock_2, and or DM me, tmock_2, at tmauk_2, and I want to hear what you have to say. Maybe I said something that you disagree with. Maybe you have questions. I'd like to talk about what you may disagree on. If you have questions, I don't know if I'll have the answer for them, but I'll try my best to answer. If I don't have the answer, I know people who probably do. And maybe you have some constructive criticism. Maybe there's something that you think I could do better. I'm always open to listening to that. And yeah, like I said, if you've watched all 3 videos, thank you so much for that. It means a lot. And maybe you're just watching this for the first time. Thank you if you made it this far. That's a feat in of itself. But I mean, all good Bible studies are usually about an hour, and so I'm sparing you some time. Yeah, if it is your first time, go check out my other videos. 3 and 4, really deep stuff. 1 and 2, I really get into some other good stuff, but then also giving you some background information about the book of Ecclesiastes. But okay, got to land the plane, wrap it up. Can't thank you enough for joining me. Thanks again. Have a great day. Keep reading your Bible. Keep diving into this wisdom literature. And yeah, always feel free to reach out. Thanks for joining me. Thank you for joining me. All right, take care. And yeah, I'll see you next week. Thank you.